The scriptures state that in the last days an evil leader will arise who will seek to rule the world. What does the Bible say about the identity of this prophetic figure known as the Antichrist? Dr. David K. Bernard explains next. Welcome to Apostolic Life in the 21st Century, a podcast dedicated to helping modern-day believers live out the teachings of the first century church. This podcast is part of the teaching ministry of Dr. David K. Bernard. Dr. Bernard has dedicated his life to studying the Bible and helping believers apply its message to their daily lives. In Apostolic Life in the 21st Century, Dr. Bernard answers your questions about what the Bible teaches and how those teachings apply to everyday life. Most Christians, and even quite a few unbelievers, are familiar with a biblical figure that has come to be known as the Antichrist. The Bible offers descriptions of this person in several different passages. Paul, for example, calls him the lawless one who will perform signs and lying wonders through the power of Satan. Most Christians, or I should say many, would classify the Antichrist as this evil leader who's going to arise in the end times and take over the world and persecute God's people. What does the Bible actually say about this person that we call the Antichrist?
Well, as you mentioned, there are references in the book of Revelation, in 2 Thessalonians. There are also some references in Daniel. When you put them all together, it seems there is an evil ruler who will exalt himself, who will claim to be God or the Messiah, who will set himself up as a false Messiah. Jesus prophesied about this in the Olivet Discourse. And so you find in 2 Thessalonians, he's called the man of sin, the son of perdition, the lawless one. In the book of Revelation, he's called the beast. He's never called the Antichrist in those passages, but 1 John talks about a spirit of Antichrist, which was already at work in his day, but would be manifest in the last times. And so people picked up that term because it does seem to pretty accurately represent, here is a man who will actually be a false Christ, who will oppose himself to the true Christ, who will offer himself as a solution. And so that term has become the most popular. Now, if you take all these passages together and you basically look at them as future prophecy, and you look at the book of Revelation, although it's highly symbolic, if you interpret these as true events that are really going to happen. In other words, not just very symbolic descriptions of spiritual warfare, but symbolic descriptions of real events that are going to happen in the future. So if you read the book of Revelation like that, basically future, basically chronological, the symbolism representing true people and true events that are going to take place, then you come up with a picture that in the end, there will rise this evil ruler who will try to control the world. He won't be fully successful, but he will start implementing his power. And you see economic power and religious power. So he'll try to set up an economic system that the whole world will have to follow him. And he'll try to set up a religious system where the whole world will worship him. And so he will have a false prophet who is able to do a certain amount of miracles, no doubt by the power of Satan. And he will be in the process of consolidating his power, of course, in Revelation 19, when Jesus Christ comes back to earth with his saints, defeats the Antichrist and his armies at the Battle of Armageddon, and then will be the last judgment, the millennial kingdom, and then eternity will usher, well, I guess the millennial kingdom, the last judgment, and eternity will usher in from that. So to answer your question, the Antichrist appears to be, under various names and guises, an evil ruler, and many believe he will be possessed by Satan, because it's really the devil opposing God, but he will try to set himself up as a false Messiah, false Christ, in opposition to the true Jesus Christ, and he will try to get worship to him instead of to Jesus Christ. He will try to establish his reign on this world and control it for his own evil purposes. And so that's what's coming up. Now, of course, it's a debate for another podcast, which I think we've had, is when will the rapture of the church happen?
Right, yeah.
And probably most of us think the rapture of the church, or catching away of the saints, if you want to use the more biblical phrase, will occur before that time. Some think the church will go through part of that time where the Antichrist is operating, which time we call the tribulation. Others believe at the end. But in any case, the main point is this: Jesus Christ will come back and defeat the Antichrist and establish his kingdom on the earth.
So having a child, having grown up in the 1980s with, the Cold War happening, there was always the speculation about who the Antichrist would be. What do you think are going to be the signs of that person? What should Christians be on the lookout for? And I'm not saying that we should engage in this sort of guessing who the Antichrist is going to be, but what would the signs be if that person were coming to power?
I think it's a mistake to try to guess, because people have tried throughout history. If you go back to the early 20th century, Benito Mussolini rising in Rome itself, which seemed to fit Revelation. He became a dictator. Adolf Hitler actually had a plan much as we've described, and he tried to kill all the Jews, and he tried to control the world. Then later communism, you have Stalin, you have other leaders, so different people. Ultimately, none of them turned out to be the one, but maybe you could see them as forerunners or prefiguring it. So I think it is going to be probably a charismatic person. That is a person who can attract a lot of acclaim, and he won't be perceived as evil. The Bible talks about Satan himself is transformed to an angel of light, and they'll say peace, peace, and there'll be sudden destruction. So he'll come with probably to a sinner who doesn't know Scripture, who's not serving the Lord. He'll be very deceptive. He'll be seen as an enlightened ruler, a wise ruler. He's going to bring peace and prosperity. He's going to be very likable, very charismatic. But I think the signs will be by the power of Satan. So I guess a discerning person will be able to discern the false spirit behind it, and maybe see the evil intention, because underneath that peaceful surface is a ruthless desire to control the world. And even an unsaved person with discernment should be able to discern that underlying desire for power, ruthlessness, deceit. And then when he starts doing things like trying to make peace with Israel, but then coming over there, reestablishing the temple, and then ultimately trying to demand worship in the temple, obviously, if it wasn't revealed before that time, it revealed his true intentions would be revealed at that time. But any attempt by a world leader to gain control of the economy, to gain control of the religious system, those would be warning signs.
And it does seem like at times we've had leaders, as you mentioned a few, that have leaned in that direction, it seemed like. Do you believe the Antichrist might be alive today, or do you feel like that's maybe baseless speculation?
It's possible. I mean, if we really believe the coming of the Lord is soon, if we really believe that the events of Revelation could happen in our lifetime, then yes. I mean, the Antichrist may not be a public figure at this point, but he could be a child or a young person or someone working in obscurity. We've seen other people rise to prominence almost overnight. And again, I don't necessarily want to name names, but we've seen very popular figures that seem to be almost media creations. So they don't have a lot of accomplishments, but they check the boxes of what the media wants, and maybe they're eloquent of speech, or maybe they are charismatic in personality, or maybe they fit a profile of what the media or popular culture is wanting. And so it's more like you're choosing an image rather than the person. Well, that whole culture, we're in a media-saturated culture where literally someone can become a media celebrity, not for anything they've accomplished substantively, and people may not even know what their underlying philosophy is, but because of a media campaign, they can become popular overnight. Well, I'm not identifying any individual that could fit. I'm just saying we are now in a culture where literally we could wake up tomorrow or in a few days or a few weeks, and this person that nobody really knew, that not even done anything, is now the most popular person in the world. I mean, that's the culture we live in. So yes, I think it's very conducive to the not only the gradual, but maybe even the sudden emergence of a figure who could become the Antichrist.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Apostolic Life in the 21st Century. If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. We also appreciate it when you share Apostolic Life in the 21st Century with a friend or family member. And make plans to join us again next time as we look at how the Bible applies to everyday life.